The fluorescent lights in the break room flickered as I stirred honey into my green tea, the same ritual I'd performed every morning for the past 8 years. The familiar hum of the coffee machine and distant chatter of coworkers created a soundtrack I knew by heart. That's when Marcus walked in. Marcus Hendricks, the founder's son, had officially taken over as CEO just 3 weeks ago after his father's retirement. He moved through the office like he owned it, which technically he did now, but there was something different about his presence. Cold. Calculating. Where his father had been warm and approachable, Marcus carried himself with the arrogance of someone who'd never had to earn respect. "Sarah," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "My office. Now." I looked up from my tea, noting the way he avoided eye contact. After 8 years of building the company's entire digital infrastructure from nothing, after countless nights spent debugging systems and implementing security protocols that had saved the company millions, I'd learned to read people's intentions. His body language screamed trouble. I followed him down the hallway, past the cubicles where my former colleagues worked on systems I'd designed, past the server room that contained architecture I'd built from scratch. My hands remained steady, but my mind was already calculating possibilities. Marcus didn't invite me to sit. He stood behind his father's old desk, a mahogany monument that had always seemed too large for the room. Now it seemed to swallow him whole. "You're terminated," he said, his voice flat and businesslike. "Effective immediately." I blinked slowly, processing the words. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me. We're restructuring, and your position is no longer necessary. We're moving toward more modern solutions." The irony wasn't lost on me. Modern solutions. I had built every modern solution this company used. The customer database, the inventory management system, the security protocols, the automated backup systems. All of it had my digital fingerprints embedded in the code. "I see," I said calmly. "And what about the transition period? The documentation handover?" Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "We'll figure it out. My new IT consultant says most of your work is outdated anyway. We need fresh perspectives." Fresh perspectives. I almost laughed. This fresh perspective was about to inherit a digital house of cards that only I knew how to maintain. But I kept my expression neutral. "Understood," I said. "I'll need to collect my personal items. Security will escort you out once you're done. You have 30 minutes. I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "And Sarah? Don't even think about taking anything that belongs to the company. We'll be watching." I smiled then, a small, knowing smile that seemed to unsettle him. "Of course not, Marcus. I wouldn't dream of it." The walk back to my desk felt surreal. 8 years of my life packed into cardboard boxes under the watchful eye of building security. My coworkers kept their heads down, but I could feel their eyes on me. Word traveled fast in offices, and by now everyone knew something was happening. Jenny from accounting approached cautiously. "Sarah, what's going on?" I shook my head slightly. "Just a restructuring. Nothing to worry about." But as I packed my personal photos and the small succulent plant I'd kept alive for 3 years, my mind was already working through the implications of what Marcus had just done. He'd fired the only person who truly understood the company's digital backbone. More importantly, he'd fired the only person who knew about the hidden vulnerabilities I'd been quietly patching for years. You see, when you build a system from the ground up, you don't just create functionality, you create dependencies. And when you're the sole architect of that system for 8 years, you become intimately familiar with every weakness, every backdoor, every potential point of failure. I'd been planning to document everything properly, to create comprehensive guides for my eventual successor. But Marcus's fresh perspective had just eliminated that transition period entirely. As security escorted me to the parking garage, I felt my phone buzz. A text from my friend Kate, who worked in the legal department. "Emergency meeting called. Something about system vulnerabilities. Are you okay?" I typed back quickly. "I'm fine. Just remember what I taught you about backing up your files." Kate had been my closest friend in the office, and she was smart enough to read between the lines. She knew I never gave casual advice about data protection. The drive home was peaceful, almost meditative. I'd lived through layoffs before, but this felt different. This felt like a massive miscalculation on Marcus's part, and I was curious to see how long it would take him to realize it. I didn't have to wait long. At 2:47 p.m., my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. By 3:15 p.m., I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I listened to the first message. Sarah, this is David from IT. We're having some issues with the customer database. Could you call me back? The second. Sarah, it's Marcus. We need to talk about the transition process. Please call me as soon as you get this. The third. Sarah, this is urgent. The entire ordering system is down. We need your help. I set my phone aside and made myself a proper lunch. After 8 years of eating desk salads and vending machine sandwiches, I was going to enjoy a real meal. By 4:30 p.m., the calls had become constant. My phone buzzed every few minutes, with increasingly desperate messages. I finally answered when Kate called. Sarah, you need to know what's happening here, she whispered. It's chaos. The customer system crashed around 2 p.m. and nobody knows how to fix it. Marcus brought in his consultant, but the guy took one look at your code and said he'd never seen architecture like this. Interesting, I said, keeping my voice neutral. That's not all. The payroll system is throwing error messages and the inventory tracker is showing everything as out of stock. Marcus is losing his mind. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Kate, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember when I showed you how to check the system logs? Yes, why? Can you access them right now? There was a pause. I'm trying. Oh my God, Sarah. There are thousands of error messages. The backup systems are failing too. The backup systems. The beautiful, redundant backup systems I'd spent 3 years perfecting. The ones that were programmed to perform integrity checks every 6 hours and automatically shut down if they detected tampering or unauthorized access attempts. Kate, I need you to document everything you're seeing. Screenshots, timestamps, everything. And do it from your personal phone. Why? Because I have a feeling someone's going to try to blame this on sabotage. At 5:15 p.m., Marcus called me directly. I answered on the 4th ring. Sarah, thank God. Look, there's been a misunderstanding. We need you to come in and help us with a few technical issues. I'm sorry, Marcus, but I don't work there anymore. Remember? This is an emergency. The entire system is down. That sounds like a problem for your new IT consultant. There's a long pause. Sarah, please. We'll pay you consultant rates. Just help us get back online. I'm afraid I can't do that. What do you mean you can't? Well, you see, when you terminated my employment, you also terminated my access to the systems. I couldn't help even if I wanted to. We can restore your access. That's not how it works, Marcus. Your security protocols don't allow for temporary access restoration. I designed them that way. Another pause. Then tell us how to fix it. I'm sorry, but that information is proprietary. Company property, as you put it. I wouldn't want to risk taking anything that belongs to the company. I could hear his breathing getting heavier. Sarah, don't play games. This is serious. I'm not playing games. I'm simply following the termination protocol you established this morning. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, what do you want? I want to finish my tea and watch the sunset. It's been a lovely day. I hung up. By 6 p.m., the local news had picked up the story. Local software company experiences major system failure scrolled across the bottom of the screen. The reporter mentioned that customers were unable to place orders, employees couldn't access payroll information, and the company's website was displaying error messages. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Thomas Hendricks. Marcus's father, the founder. Can we talk? I waited 20 minutes before responding. Of course, Mr. Hendricks. You have my number. He called immediately. Sarah, first, I want to apologize for what happened today. I had no idea Marcus was planning to terminate your employment. I appreciate that, sir. Can you help us understand what's happening with the systems? I took a deep breath. Mr. Hendricks, I spent 8 years building security protocols specifically designed to prevent unauthorized access and protect the company's data. The systems are working exactly as intended. I don't understand. When an employee's access is terminated, the system automatically begins a security audit. If it detects any anomalies or unauthorized access attempts, it shuts down non-essential functions to prevent data breaches. And how do we restore normal operations? That requires administrative override codes that only I have access to. There was a long silence. Sarah, I'm going to ask you something directly. Did you design these systems to fail if you were fired? I considered my words carefully. Mr. Hendricks, I designed these systems to protect the company from internal and external threats. Every protocol I implemented was approved by the board and documented in the security reports I filed quarterly. That's not what I asked.
No, sir.
I designed these systems to be secure. The fact that they're protecting the company from potential data breaches right now is exactly what they were designed to do. Another pause. What would it take to restore normal operations? That would require a senior-level administrator to manually verify the security of all systems and input the appropriate override codes. And you're the only senior-level administrator? Yes, sir. I see. The next morning, I woke up to find 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. The company had been down for over 16 hours, and according to the news reports, they were losing approximately $50,000 per hour in lost sales. I made myself breakfast and checked my email. There were dozens of messages from colleagues, reporters, and even a few job offers from competitors who'd heard about the situation. The most interesting email came from Jenkins and Associates, a business consulting firm that specialized in corporate restructuring. They wanted to discuss a potential opportunity to serve as an independent contractor for system restoration services. I was reading their proposal when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Thomas Hendricks standing on my front porch, looking exhausted. I opened the door. Mr. Hendricks, this is unexpected. May I come in? I stepped aside and led him to my living room. He sat heavily on the couch, running his hands through his gray hair. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I nodded. Did you know this would happen when Marcus fired you? I met his eyes. I knew it was a possibility. The systems were designed to prioritize security over convenience. But you didn't try to prevent it. Mr. Hendricks, I was given 30 minutes to collect my personal belongings and escorted out by security. I wasn't given an opportunity to discuss transition protocols or system vulnerabilities. He leaned forward. What would you have done differently? I would have recommended a 6-month transition period. I would have documented all critical processes, trained a replacement, and gradually transferred administrative privileges. I would have ensured business continuity. And now the systems are doing exactly what they were designed to do, protecting the company's data from unauthorized access. Thomas looked at me for a long moment. You know, I built this company from nothing. Started in my garage with a business loan and a dream. I never went to business school, never had a degree in management. I just worked hard and treated people fairly. I waited for him to continue. I thought I was doing the right thing by stepping down, letting Marcus take over. He has an MBA, connections, fresh ideas. But I think I may have made a mistake. What kind of mistake? I think I forgot that running a company isn't about having the right degree or the right connections. It's about understanding what makes the company work. And Marcus never took the time to understand what you built. I nodded slowly. The systems are complex because the business is complex. 8 years of growth, acquisitions, regulatory changes, security threats, it all gets built into the architecture over time. Can you fix it? I can restore normal operations, yes. What would that take? I had been expecting this question. A comprehensive security audit, system verification, and administrative override. Probably 8 to 12 hours of work. And your fee? $50,000. Thomas didn't flinch. Done. Plus a formal apology from Marcus and a guarantee that this kind of situation won't happen again. What kind of guarantee? I want a consulting contract. Long-term. Whenever you need system modifications or security updates, I want to be the first call. And if I say no? I shrugged. Then you're welcome to figure it out on your own. Thomas smiled for the first time since arriving. You know, I like you, Sarah. I always have. You remind me of myself when I was starting out. Hungry, determined, not afraid to fight for what you're worth. 2 hours later, I was back in the office I'd been escorted out of less than 24 hours earlier. The atmosphere had changed completely. Where there had been confidence and routine, there was now panic and confusion. Marcus was waiting for me in the lobby, and he looked like he hadn't slept. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. Sarah, he said, his voice strained. I want to apologize for yesterday. I acted hastily. I looked at him calmly. Yes, you did. I hope we can move past this and work together to resolve the situation. Marcus, let me be very clear about something. I'm not here as your employee. I'm here as an independent contractor hired by your father to restore system functionality. This is a one-time engagement. His jaw tightened. Of course. The next 12 hours were a masterclass in digital archaeology. I had to carefully verify every system, check every backup, and ensure that no data had been compromised during the shutdown. The work was methodical, precise, and exhausting. But it was also satisfying. With each system I brought back online, I could feel the company coming back to life. Orders started flowing in, employees regained access to their files, and the error messages that had been flashing across monitors all over the building finally disappeared. Marcus hovered around me for the first few hours, asking questions and making suggestions. I ignored him completely, focusing on my work. Eventually, he gave up and retreated to his office. By 8 p.m., everything was back to normal. The systems were running smoothly, the backups were functioning properly, and the security protocols were operating as designed. I found Thomas in his old office, which he'd apparently reclaimed for the day. It's done, I said. Everything's back online. He looked up from his laptop. Any data loss? None. The security protocols worked perfectly. And the vulnerability that caused the shutdown? I sat down across from him. There was no vulnerability, Mr. Hendricks. The system worked exactly as designed. I don't understand. The shutdown was a security feature, not a bug. When my administrative access was terminated without proper handover protocols, the system automatically protected itself from potential threats. Thomas leaned back in his chair. So Marcus didn't just fire you. He accidentally triggered a security lockdown. That's correct. And you're the only one who knew how to reverse it. That's also correct. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. I nodded. Would you consider coming back? Not as an employee, but as a partner. I'm thinking about restructuring the company, and I could use someone with your expertise. I had been expecting this too. What kind of partnership? Equity stake. Board position. Complete autonomy over all technical decisions. And Marcus? Thomas sighed. Marcus is young. He'll learn. But he needs to understand that leadership isn't about making dramatic gestures. It's about understanding the value of the people around you. I considered the offer. I'll think about it. Take all the time you need. As I was packing up my equipment, Kate appeared beside my temporary workstation. So, what happens now? She asked. Now I go home and get some sleep. No, I mean with the company. With Marcus. I looked around the office, at the systems humming quietly in the background, at the employees who were finally able to do their jobs again. I think Marcus learned something important today, I said. He learned that running a company isn't about having the power to fire people. It's about understanding what makes the company work. Kate smiled. And what about you? What did you learn? I thought about that for a moment. I learned that sometimes the best way to prove your value is to let someone else discover it for themselves. 3 weeks later, I signed the partnership agreement. Marcus remained as CEO, but with significantly reduced authority over technical decisions. He also issued a formal apology to the entire company and implemented new policies to prevent arbitrary terminations. The consulting contract I'd negotiated became the foundation for a larger role as Chief Technology Officer. I now sit on the board of directors and have final approval over all system modifications and security protocols. Marcus and I maintain a professional relationship, but there's an underlying tension that will probably never fully disappear. He learned an expensive lesson about the difference between authority and leadership, and I learned that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is simply to let the consequences speak for themselves. The company is thriving now with stronger systems, better security, and more robust leadership. The crisis that Marcus inadvertently created ended up forcing positive changes that might never have happened otherwise. And every morning when I walk into the office, I remember the feeling of being escorted out by security, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Because that moment of apparent defeat became the foundation for something much stronger, respect that was earned rather than demanded, and power that was demonstrated rather than assumed. Sometimes the best revenge is simply allowing someone to face the consequences of their own actions. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, those consequences can lead to something better than what you had before. The systems I built 8 years ago are still running perfectly, protecting the company from threats both external and internal. But now they're backed by leadership that understands their value, and that makes all the difference. As I sit in my new office, looking out at the same view I had before, I realize that I didn't just restore the company's systems that day. I restored something more important, the understanding that every person in an organization has value, and that value should be recognized and protected. Marcus still walks through the office like he owns it because he does. But now he walks with the knowledge that ownership without understanding is just expensive ignorance, and that the most important asset any company has is the people who make it work. And that's a lesson worth $50,000 plus equity. 6 months had passed since what the office staff now quietly referred to as the shutdown. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one where my technical decisions were respected and my expertise was valued. But I should have known that Marcus wouldn't stay quiet forever. The first sign of trouble came during a routine board meeting. Marcus had been unusually quiet during my quarterly security report, but as we wrapped up, he cleared his throat. "I'd like to propose bringing in an external audit firm to review our technical infrastructure," he said, his voice carefully measured, "just to ensure we're following industry best practices." Thomas looked surprised. "Sarah just completed a comprehensive security audit last month." "I'm thinking more of an independent perspective," Marcus continued, avoiding my eyes. "Someone who can give us an objective assessment of our systems and processes." I kept my expression neutral, but internally I was calculating. An external audit wasn't necessarily a threat, but the timing and Marcus's body language suggested this wasn't about improving security. "What firm did you have in mind?" I asked. "Precision Tech Solutions. They specialize in legacy system modernization." I knew Precision Tech. They were a consulting firm that made their money by convincing companies to completely overhaul their existing systems, regardless of whether those systems were functioning properly. Their business model relied on making everything seem outdated and insecure. "I see," I said. "And what's prompted this concern about our current infrastructure?" Marcus finally met my eyes. "I just think it's prudent to get a fresh perspective. Our systems are complex, perhaps overly so." There it was. He was still trying to undermine my work, just more subtly this time. Thomas looked between us, sensing the tension. "Sarah, what's your take on this?" "External audits can be valuable," I said carefully. "But I'd recommend using a firm that specializes in security assessment rather than system replacement. If the goal is to validate our current infrastructure, we need auditors who aren't financially incentivized to recommend expensive overhauls." "Precision Tech does security work too," Marcus said quickly. "They do," I agreed. "But their primary revenue stream comes from implementation projects. There's an inherent conflict of interest." The room fell silent. Thomas drummed his fingers on the table, a habit I'd learned meant he was thinking hard. "Sarah, can you recommend an alternative firm?" "CyberShield Associates. They're audit specialists. They don't do implementation work, and they have an excellent reputation for objective assessments." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've already had preliminary discussions with Precision Tech. Then you can have preliminary discussions with CyberShield too," Thomas said firmly. We'll evaluate both proposals before making a decision. After the meeting, I stayed behind as the other board members filed out. Marcus hesitated at the door, then left without saying anything. Thomas closed his laptop and looked at me. What's really going on here, Sarah? Marcus is still trying to prove that my systems are unnecessary. He thinks if he can get an outside firm to recommend a complete overhaul, it'll validate his original decision to fire me. And would a complete overhaul be a bad thing? I considered the question. Not necessarily, but it would be expensive, time-consuming, and risky. Our current systems work well because they've evolved with the business. Starting over means losing 8 years of optimization and customization. How expensive are we talking? Precision Tech's typical projects run between $2 and $5 million, plus ongoing maintenance contracts that can cost hundreds of thousands annually. Thomas whistled softly. That's real money. It is. And for a company our size, it's money that could be better spent on growth and innovation rather than replacing functional systems. 2 weeks later, both consulting firms presented their proposals. CyberShield's presentation was thorough and professional. They outlined a comprehensive security assessment that would evaluate our current systems against industry standards and provide recommendations for improvement. Precision Tech's presentation was flashier. They had glossy graphics showing modern architecture solutions and spoke extensively about digital transformation and cloud-native scalability. Their assessment proposal included phases for legacy system modernization and infrastructure optimization. The price difference was stark. CyberShield quoted $25,000 for a complete security audit. Precision Tech quoted $75,000 for their comprehensive digital assessment, with additional phases that could cost significantly more. During the Q&A session, I asked Precision Tech's lead consultant a direct question. If your assessment determines that our current systems are secure and functioning optimally, would you recommend against modernization? The consultant hesitated. Well, there are always opportunities for improvement in any system architecture. That's not what I asked. If our systems meet security standards and business requirements, would you recommend leaving them as they are? Our experience suggests that most legacy systems benefit from modernization, regardless of their current functionality. I looked at Thomas, who was taking notes. Marcus was nodding along with the consultant's answer. Thank you, I said. That's very revealing. After both firms left, the board reconvened to discuss the proposals. I think Precision Tech offers more comprehensive services, Marcus began. Their modernization approach could position us for future growth. At 3 times the cost, board member Janet Morrison pointed out. And Sarah raises a good point about potential conflicts of interest. Sometimes you have to invest in the future, Marcus replied. Staying with outdated systems just because they're familiar isn't good business. I waited for him to finish before responding. Marcus, can you identify specific limitations in our current systems that would justify a $2 million replacement project? The systems are old, complex, and difficult to maintain. They're 8 years old, which is recent in enterprise software terms. They're complex because the business is complex. And as for maintenance, we've had 99.7% uptime over the past year. But what happens if something goes wrong? You're the only one who understands how everything works. There it was. His real concern wasn't about the systems themselves. It was about his dependence on me. That's why we have documentation protocols and why I've been training additional staff members, I said. Knowledge transfer is an ongoing process, not a one-time event. Thomas held up his hand. Let me ask a different question. Sarah, if we hired CyberShield to do their security audit and they found significant vulnerabilities, would you support a modernization project? Absolutely. If independent experts identify genuine security risks that can't be addressed through patches or upgrades, then replacement becomes necessary. And Marcus, if CyberShield's audit shows that our systems are secure and well-designed, would you drop the modernization proposal? Marcus hesitated. I suppose that would depend on the specific findings. That's not really an answer, Janet said. Either you trust independent experts or you don't. The vote was close, 4 in favor of CyberShield, 3 in favor of precision tech. Marcus had lobbied hard behind the scenes, but Thomas's support for the more conservative approach carried weight with the other board members. CyberShield's audit took 3 weeks. Their team was professional, thorough, and asked excellent questions about our security protocols, data handling procedures, and system architecture. I cooperated fully, providing documentation, explaining design decisions, and walking them through our most critical processes. I had confidence in the systems I'd built, but I also knew that external validation would be valuable regardless of the outcome. When the audit team presented their findings, Marcus looked like he was expecting vindication. Instead, he got a professional assessment that validated nearly every technical decision I'd made over the past 8 years. Your security architecture is well-designed and comprehensive, the lead auditor reported. The system design shows clear evidence of careful planning and evolution over time. We found no significant vulnerabilities and only minor recommendations for improvement. The report went into detail about our backup systems, access controls, data encryption, and incident response procedures. In each area, they rated our implementation as meets or exceeds industry standards. Marcus's face grew progressively darker as the presentation continued. The system complexity that was mentioned as a concern is actually a strength, the auditor continued. Complex businesses require sophisticated technical solutions. The integration between different system components is seamless and well-documented. Their final recommendation was brief. Continue current security practices with minor updates as outlined in our detailed report. No major system changes are necessary or recommended at this time. The cost for implementing their minor recommendations? $15,000 in software updates and additional training. After the presentation, Marcus stood abruptly. This doesn't address the fundamental issue of system modernization and future scalability. The auditor looked puzzled. Our assessment covered scalability extensively. Your current architecture can support approximately 300% growth before requiring significant modifications. But what about cloud integration, digital transformation, artificial intelligence capabilities? Those are business strategy decisions, not security concerns. Your current infrastructure could support any of those initiatives if you choose to pursue them. Thomas thanked the audit team and dismissed them. As soon as they left, Marcus turned to me. This doesn't prove anything. They were just looking at security, not business efficiency. Security was what you said you were concerned about, I replied calmly. I think we need a broader assessment, something that looks at the total cost of ownership and modernization opportunities. Janet laughed. Marcus, you've gotten 2 independent assessments that both say the systems are working fine. At what point do you accept that maybe Sarah knows what she's doing? This isn't personal, Marcus said quickly. This is about making the best decisions for the company. Really? I said, because it feels pretty personal from where I'm sitting. Thomas intervened. I think we've gotten the information we need. The audit shows our systems are secure and functioning well. Unless someone can identify specific business problems that require technical solutions, I don't see the need for major changes. Marcus's face flushed. You're all making a mistake. We're going to fall behind our competitors if we don't modernize. Which competitors? I asked. And in what specific ways are we falling behind? Marcus struggled to answer. It's about staying current, about not being left behind. Staying current with what? Our systems are updated regularly, our security is strong, and our uptime is excellent. What exactly are we being left behind in? The room was quiet. Marcus looked around at the other board members, but found no support. Fine, he said finally. But when we start losing business because our technology is outdated, don't blame me. He left the room, and the remaining board members exchanged glances. That went well, Janet said dryly. Thomas sighed. Sarah, I need to ask you something privately. Can we talk after the others leave? 20 minutes later, it was just Thomas and me in the boardroom. How much longer do you think this is going to continue? He asked. What do you mean? Marcus trying to undermine you. This audit was just the latest attempt. There will be others. I had been thinking about the same thing. As long as he sees me as a threat to his authority, probably indefinitely. And how do you feel about that? I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I'm tired of it. I like the work, I like the company, and I respect you. But constantly having to defend my competence is exhausting. Thomas nodded slowly. What if I told you I was considering a change in leadership structure? What kind of change? What if Marcus focused on business development and external partnerships while you took over operational management? I stared at him. You're talking about making me CEO. I'm talking about recognizing that leadership comes in different forms. Marcus has strengths in networking and strategic planning. You have strengths in systems thinking and operational excellence. Maybe the company would be better served by utilizing both sets of skills rather than forcing one person to do everything. The idea was appealing, but I knew the complications it would create. What does Marcus think about this? Marcus doesn't know yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Thomas, if you make me CEO, Marcus will either quit or spend all his time trying to sabotage me. Neither outcome is good for the company. What if we structured it differently? COSOS, with clearly defined areas of responsibility. I thought about it. The idea had merit, but it also had risks. Can I ask you something? Why are you considering this now? Thomas was quiet for a moment. Because I'm starting to realize that succession planning isn't just about choosing the right person. It's about creating the right structure for the business to thrive. And you don't think Marcus can handle the full scope of leadership? I think Marcus has potential, but he's not ready for the responsibility. And trying to force readiness hasn't worked out well so far. That was certainly true. The past 6 months had shown that Marcus's instincts were often wrong, and his tendency to act impulsively created more problems than it solved. If you're serious about this, I said, I'd want some conditions. Such as clear authority boundaries. If I'm responsible for operations, I need final decision-making power in that area. No second-guessing, no overrides, no committee decisions on technical matters. Done. And I want a path forward. If this co-CEO structure works well, I want to know that there's potential for me to eventually take over full leadership. Thomas smiled. Sarah, if this works well, the board will probably insist on it. We talked for another hour about the details. The structure would be announced as a strategic decision to leverage specialized expertise. Marcus would focus on external relationships, business development, and strategic planning. I would handle operations, technology, and internal management. The announcement would come after the implementation of CyberShield's recommendations, positioning it as a natural evolution based on the company's strong technical foundation. I left that meeting with mixed feelings. The opportunity was exactly what I'd been working toward for 8 years, but I knew it would create new challenges. Marcus wouldn't accept the arrangement gracefully, and managing that conflict would become part of my job. But I also knew that I was ready. The past 6 months had shown me that I could handle pressure, make difficult decisions, and maintain professionalism even when under attack. Most importantly, I'd learned that competence and integrity were more powerful than politics and family connections. It had taken a crisis to prove that point, but once proven, it created opportunities that wouldn't have existed otherwise. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the journey from that morning 8 months ago when Marcus had fired me, to this afternoon when his father had offered me a leadership role. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Sometimes the best response to being underestimated is simply to let your work speak for itself. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, that work becomes impossible to ignore. The announcement would come next week. Marcus would fight it, the staff would be surprised, and the industry would take notice. But I was ready for all of that. After all, I'd already survived the worst Marcus could throw at me. Everything else would be easy by comparison. The announcement came on a Thursday morning during the monthly all-hands meeting. Thomas stood at the front of the conference room, looking more confident than I'd seen him in months. I want to share some exciting news about our leadership structure, he began. Effective immediately, we're implementing a dual CEO model to better leverage our executive expertise. I watched faces around the room. Some people looked curious, others confused. Marcus sat in the front row, his expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Marcus will continue as CEO of External Operations, focusing on business development, strategic partnerships, and market expansion. Sarah will be joining him as CEO of Internal Operations, overseeing technology, processes, and organizational development. The room was dead silent for a moment. Then Kate started clapping, and others gradually joined in. The applause was genuine but subdued. People were still processing what this meant. After the meeting, I was surrounded by congratulations and questions. Most people seemed genuinely pleased, especially those who'd worked closely with me over the years. But I noticed some of Marcus's allies keeping their distance. David from sales approached me during lunch. "Sarah, congratulations. I have to ask, though, how is this going to work day to day? Two CEOs seems complicated." "It's about specialization," I explained. "Marcus focuses on external growth. I focus on internal excellence. The overlap should be minimal. And if there are conflicts, then we'll work them out professionally." David nodded, but I could see he wasn't entirely convinced. Neither was I, to be honest. The first real test came 2 weeks later. Marcus had been unusually quiet since the announcement, but I should have known he was planning something. I arrived Monday morning to find an email waiting for me. "Sarah, I've scheduled a presentation for the board next Friday. Jenkins and Associates will be discussing optimization opportunities for our internal processes. I thought you should know." Marcus. Jenkins and Associates. The same firm that had contacted me during the system shutdown, except now they were being brought in by Marcus instead of reaching out independently. I called Thomas immediately. "Did you approve a board presentation for Jenkins and Associates?" "No. This is the first I'm hearing about it." "What's the topic?" "Process optimization." Marcus scheduled it for Friday. There was a pause. "Let me look into this." An hour later, Thomas called me back. I spoke with Marcus. He says it's just an informational presentation about operational efficiency best practices. "And you believe that?" I told him that any recommendations affecting internal operations would need your approval before implementation. "Thomas, you know this is just another attempt to undermine my authority." "Maybe. But he's within his rights to bring in consultants for informational purposes. Just make sure you're prepared for whatever they present." I spent the rest of the week researching Jenkins and Associates. They were legitimate, but their business model was similar to precision tech. They made money by convincing companies to implement expensive organizational changes. Their typical recommendation was to streamline operations by consolidating departments, reducing headcount, and implementing efficiency metrics. In practice, this usually meant laying off experienced employees and replacing them with cheaper alternatives. Friday arrived, and Jenkins presented their preliminary assessment of our operational structure. They suggested that our IT department was over-resourced and that many functions could be optimized through automation and outsourcing. Their recommendations included reducing IT staff by 40%, outsourcing system maintenance to a managed service provider, and implementing performance tracking software to monitor employee productivity. The cost savings, they claimed, could exceed $300,000 annually. Marcus nodded along enthusiastically. "This aligns with my vision for a leaner, more efficient organization." I waited until they finished before responding. "Thank you for the presentation. I have several questions about your methodology and recommendations." I pulled up my laptop and connected it to the projector. "First, let's look at actual performance metrics rather than theoretical projections." I displayed a series of charts showing our current IT performance, system uptime, response times, security incident rates, and cost per user compared to industry benchmarks. Our IT department currently delivers service levels that exceed industry standards at costs below market rates. The over-resourcing you identified actually represents efficiency, not waste. I clicked to the next slide. Second, let's examine the outsourcing recommendation. I've analyzed the total cost of ownership for managed services versus internal support. The numbers were stark. While managed services appeared cheaper on paper, the hidden costs, contract management, knowledge transfer, reduced flexibility, and vendor lock-in made them significantly more expensive over time. Third, the productivity monitoring software you're recommending costs $150,000 annually and has been shown in multiple studies to decrease employee satisfaction and increase turnover. I looked directly at the Jenkins consultant. Can you explain how reducing employee satisfaction while increasing costs represents an optimization? The consultant fumbled for an answer. Well, the productivity gains from monitoring typically offset those concerns. Do you have actual data supporting that claim for companies similar to ours? Our general experience suggests. I'm not asking about general experience. I'm asking for specific, measurable data. The consultant looked uncomfortable. Marcus stepped in. Sarah, I think you're being unnecessarily aggressive. These are just recommendations for consideration. Marcus, these recommendations would increase our operational costs by approximately $400,000 annually while reducing service quality and employee satisfaction. That's not optimization, it's organizational sabotage. The room was tense. Thomas leaned forward. Sarah, can you substantiate that cost increase claim? I clicked to my final slide, which showed a detailed financial analysis of Jenkins' recommendations. Managed services contract, $280,000 annually versus current internal costs of $180,000. Productivity monitoring software, $150,000 annually with no measurable benefit. Estimated productivity loss from reduced employee satisfaction, $200,000 in turnover and training costs. Total additional cost, $450,000 annually. Plus the one-time cost of implementing these changes, approximately $200,000. I closed my laptop. I recommend we decline these suggestions and continue with our current operational model, which is already optimized for our specific needs. Marcus's face was red. You're being resistant to change. These consultants specialize in organizational efficiency. They specialize in selling organizational changes, regardless of whether those changes are beneficial. There's a difference. Thomas called for a brief recess. During the break, Janet Morrison approached me. That was impressive, Sarah. You came prepared. I always come prepared when someone's trying to dismantle my department. Is that what you think Marcus is doing? I looked at her seriously. Janet, this is the third time in 6 months that Marcus has brought in outside consultants to recommend changes to systems or processes I manage. Each time, their recommendations would have cost the company money while reducing performance. At what point does this pattern become clear? She nodded slowly. I see your point. When we reconvened, Thomas asked for a vote on the Jenkins recommendations. The result was unanimous, declined. Marcus looked furious, but he kept his voice level. I think we're making a mistake by being so resistant to outside expertise. We're not resistant to expertise, I replied. We're resistant to expensive solutions to problems that don't exist. After the meeting, Marcus cornered me in the hallway. You think you're so smart, don't you? Always have an answer for everything. Marcus, I think I'm competent. There's a difference. This dual CEO thing isn't going to work. You know that, right? It's working fine so far. For now. But eventually, Dad's going to have to choose between us. And when that happens, blood is thicker than water. I looked at him calmly. Marcus, do you really think your father built this company by prioritizing family relationships over business results? He didn't answer, but his expression said everything. Over the next few months, the pattern continued. Marcus would bring in consultants or propose changes that would have undermined operational efficiency. I would present data-driven counterarguments, and the board would consistently side with evidence over enthusiasm. Meanwhile, my side of the business was thriving. We implemented CyberShield's security recommendations ahead of schedule and under budget. Employee satisfaction in my departments was at an all-time high. Our operational metrics continued to exceed industry standards. Marcus's external operations were doing well too, which created an interesting dynamic. His business development efforts were genuinely successful. He was good at networking, identifying opportunities, and negotiating partnerships. But his inability to recognize internal competence was becoming a liability. The breaking point came during our quarterly board review in December. Thomas was reviewing departmental performance when he paused at Marcus's metrics. Marcus, your external numbers are excellent. New partnerships are up 35%, and the revenue pipeline looks strong. But I'm concerned about the consulting costs in your budget. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Those are investment in strategic planning and process improvement. They're also approaching $200,000 annually with no measurable return on investment. I had been tracking this too. Marcus had been bringing in consultants monthly, each time hoping to find someone who would validate his desire to restructure internal operations. Sarah, Thomas continued, your operational costs are down 12% year over year, while performance metrics are up across the board. Can you explain that? Efficiency improvements, better resource allocation, and preventive maintenance. We're spending money strategically rather than reactively. Thomas nodded. The contrast is pretty stark. One department is reducing costs while improving performance, while another is increasing costs while seeking performance improvements. Marcus bristled. You can't compare external business development with internal operations. They're completely different functions. You're right, Thomas agreed. But I can compare consulting expenses to results. And the pattern suggests we might want to adjust our approach. After the meeting, Thomas asked me to stay behind again. Sarah, I want to run something by you. What would you think about taking on budget authority for all consulting contracts? I considered the implications. That would essentially give me veto power over Marcus's consultant recommendations. Yes, it would. And you think that's necessary? I think it's fiscally responsible. We can't keep spending money on consultants who recommend expensive solutions to non-existent problems. It was a significant shift in authority, and we both knew it. Marcus would see it as another attack on his autonomy. If you do this, I said, Marcus is going to escalate his efforts to undermine me. Probably. Can you handle that? I smiled. Thomas, I've been handling that for 8 months already. I think I can manage a little longer. The policy change was announced the following week. All consulting contracts over $10,000 would require approval from both CEOs, with the internal operations CEO having final authority over implementation decisions. Marcus's reaction was predictable. He requested a private meeting with Thomas and me. This is unacceptable, he began. You're essentially making Sarah my supervisor. I'm making Sarah the gatekeeper for consulting expenses, Thomas corrected. You can still bring in consultants for strategic planning and business development. But she can veto any recommendations they make. She can veto recommendations that affect internal operations, yes. Marcus turned to me. And you're comfortable with this? Having veto power over my decisions. I'm comfortable with having authority over my areas of responsibility, I replied. Just like you have authority over external partnerships. This isn't the same thing. You're right. Your external partnerships don't affect my ability to do my job. But your consultant recommendations consistently try to change how my departments operate. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised both Thomas and me.
Fine.
If that's how you want to play this, I'll stop bringing in consultants altogether. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Marcus, that's not necessary. The policy just requires collaboration on implementation. No, I get it. Sarah wins again. She always wins, doesn't she? He stood up and walked toward the door, then turned back. But this isn't over. Eventually, someone's going to notice that this company is being run by someone who wasn't even part of the family legacy. And when that happens, we'll see how much your competence is really worth. After he left, Thomas and I sat in silence for a minute. Well, Thomas finally said, that went better than expected. I laughed despite myself. How is that better than expected? He didn't quit, and he didn't threaten to sue us. In Marcus's world, that counts as restraint. But I knew Marcus wasn't done. His comment about family legacy and outside recognition suggested he was planning something bigger than consultant recommendations. I was right. 2 weeks later, I found out what he'd been working on.